Good evening, suburban readers and viewers. Welcome to another edition of Beyond the Pages. I'm Beryl Wajsman, editor-in-chief of the paper. Today's Beyond the Pages will not have guests. It will not be a question and answer. I want to share some thoughts with you on the passing of a very special man whose funeral was today. And of course, it was a virtual funeral. The attendees were just members of the family, very few in the inner circle. And of course, I'm speaking about the passing of Father John Walsh. He was a dear friend over the past 30 years. I think at almost every important moment of our lives, we have been there for each other. He was a friend, he was a mentor. Just 2 weeks ago, I was privileged to be with him and Israeli Consul General David Levy when Consul General Levy made a contribution to the expansion of Nazareth House, the Nazareth community that Father John founded and was so passionately involved with. Of course, the expansion is called John's House. And I was rather pleased to be able to facilitate that. But John and I would talk sometimes, a couple of times a week. And of course, when we heard last Monday of the heart attack that took his life, it put a pall on the whole city. There was a sense of solemnity in the city. And perhaps that's because all of us realized we shall not soon see his like again. Edna St. Vincent Millay had a beautiful line in a poem. She wrote, "Where you used to be, there is a hole in the world, which I find myself constantly walking around in the daytime and falling into at night. I miss you like hell." I think that's how we all feel about the passing of Father John. He was one of the irreplaceables. He was 78 years young, and he was young. It's not possible at times to remove oneself emotionally from the appreciation of great men because he was a great man. And such is the case with Father John, a man beloved by all those he touched, a man who brought together so many for the first time, a unifying force of nature. Our generations aren't growing stronger. Our world is sadder today. The texture of our lives at this November the 16th and going forward is and will be poorer. I first met Father John when I was at McGill Law School, and he was a speaker at a conference I held on Holocaust remembrance. He had just started his unparalleled ecumenical work with Father Stephen Valiquette and Father Barry Egan Jones, and he was in the process of perfecting his Hebrew. John brought so many communities together. I remember when I received my Martin Luther King Jr. Award, his was the first hand that was stretched out in greeting. And just last year, when the St. Patrick's Society named him as Irishman of the Year, I was honored to be able to say a few words and stand next to him as he received his well-earned praise. Father John's passing comes at such a time when so much of his dream for the Nazareth community was realized. It was expanding, was coming together. They were already looking at a fourth building. And of course, his devotion to his particular house, John's house, his particular component of the Nazareth community, will house young adults who suffer from mental health disorders and are at a higher risk of homelessness. And of course, it's fitting that he received the Order of Canada just 2 years ago, honoring his work with all charitable causes, but specifically the homeless. And it's fitting that young people who are homeless or find themselves in transition will be able to make use of John's house because he was such a source of optimism and practical help and guidance to so many young people. Father John served as a priest for 53 years, as a curate, a chaplain, a pastor, a biblical scholar, and a professor. He was a passionate lover of Israel, having lived there for several years and learned fluent Hebrew. He never missed an Israel Independence Day parade. No one in this country did more for Catholic-Jewish reconciliation. In his autobiography, God is Calling, Don't Keep Him on Hold, he wrote, "As a priest, my ministry could not be limited to the administration of the sacraments as the only way to receive God's grace. It was my mission to work with all people to bring about justice, where there is injustice, to uphold human rights, to work for peace, but above all, to preach and teach of a living God of mercy, who was slow to anger and quick to forgive. Father John was a child of Montreal's North End near Gerry Park. He was Irish, of course, and it was a neighborhood that soon had many immigrant families from Italy. Father John said it was a great place to grow up. I played baseball, hockey, and football, and I learned French and some Italian. He has an older sister, Marlene, with whom he was always very close. In an interview several years ago, he said, "We were brought up with a strong sense of family. My brother-in-law, Tom, died relatively young, and I'm close to my nieces and nephews. I'm very much part of their family. In fact, just last week, the week he died, he was making plans for his annual visit to her in Calgary. For 2 decades, he served a large and loyal congregation at St. Jean-Brebeuf in LaSalle, where 12 to 1,500 parishioners gathered on any given Sunday. At its height, the congregation had 500 volunteers and 4 choirs, thanks to the work of Father John. Father John Walsh graduated from high school when he was 15 and university at 19. He completed his religious studies at St. Dunstan's in Prince Edward Island and was ordained on May 21st, 1966 by Paul Emile Cardinal Leger. He once said, "The priesthood is a consciousness, a kind of awareness that comes over you. You can't shed it. It's part of you." Of his ecumenical work that was sparked by a 1973 exchange trip to Israel that lasted several years, he once wrote, "The experience transformed me. I began to walk with Jesus drawn from the depth of Jewish scripture, which made me realize we are in a covenant, in a partnership with God, working together to make the world better. We have different religions and cultures, but we all recognize one God. It is up to us to get along better and recognize that maybe we have more in common than we thought." And on his involvement in Christian-Jewish dialogue, he once said, "I'm a much better person as a result of my association with the Jewish community. I'm working for the subsidiary company. All of our liturgy comes from the Jewish faith. They were there before we were. I gained a deeper understanding of our own scriptures after studying theirs." Father John's community activities were all-encompassing. For some 15 years, he hosted a top-rated radio show on CJD. He was chaplain of the police department and firefighters in Lachine from 1966 to 1968. He was also then chaplain of the schools in Dorval until 1973. He was a past president of the board of the Missing Children's Network of Canada and also past president of Catholic Community Services. The Father John Walsh Celebrity Golf Tournament till today has raised almost $1 million for Nazareth House. And along with Robin Burns and Jean Paget, Father John assisted in organizing the Father's Day Walk of Courage to raise funds for prostate cancer research. In 2016, he was Grand Marshal of the St. Patrick's Day Parade. His friendship spanned the world, accompanying Elie Wiesel on one of his visits to Montreal, being one of 24 religious leaders invited to lunch with the Dalai Lama, and organizing the activities of Pope John Paul II's 1984 visit to Montreal. I think I would leave the last word to my friend author, Alan Hustak, who was as close as I was to Father John. Alan and John went back further. And he perhaps summed up John's philosophy of ministry, but also of life best. Alan recalled that Father John said, "Ministry is taking risks and multitasking." Father John, nobody did it better than you. Good day. Good luck.